Shalom, friends. This is Mayim, and I have a special treat for you today on my YouTube channel. I don't interview people often, but I wanted to interview my speech coach. I entered a contest for public speaking, and this man is a Toastmaster, um, he's a grand Toastmaster. He's a very intelligent man, and he's very inspiring to hear when he gives his speeches on stage, which is, why he's one of the top. He's one of the best. But this isn't really a planned speech that we're going to do today. We're just going to have an interview, and we're going to talk about health and healing, which of course, many people on my channel are interested in. I have a mix of, especially on my YouTube channel, I have a mix of people who are um, into faith. I have Jews and Christians that follow me on my channel on my YouTube, and I also have people who are interested in holistic health and healing, because of course, holistic health and healing incorporates body, mind, and spirit. So, anyways, Dave, my Coach Dave, what did you want to talk about today?
I wanted to talk to you about the fact that in today's world, not everybody in the United States gets the same health care, although they go and see the same health care practitioner. And start off with my personal experience. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and the oncologist I went to, I saw him 3 times. And among the things he did that made me think that I saw him 2 times too much was that he made a point of saying that he was prescribing a very old and very inexpensive medication to treat my prostate cancer. And I thought that was strange, but at first I thought, well, maybe it is still efficacious, even though it is an older medicine. Although I knew there were newer medicines out there that were designed to be more successful in attacking prostate cancer. So I went with that. But then it was very clear that the man did not want to talk to me, did not want to listen to me, did not want to answer my questions. He would cut me off in conversations. He wouldn't listen to me when I asked him a question. I went back to review his notes of my appointment with him. There are all kinds of things in the notes that he never said to me. For instance, like the importance of taking magnesium and calcium to fight the potential of bone cancer, which is common in prostate cancer. He never said that to me, but I read those in his notes. He made it very clear to me that he just couldn't wait to go and see somebody else. He was eager to shuttle me out of the office. And the most damning thing he did, that when I saw him at the height of COVID, when hospitals were masked up, and I saw him 3 times, and 2 of those 3 times, he took his mask off in the middle of our appointment. And the fact of the matter is, I don't think he gave 2 hoots whether I survived or not, just as long as it looked like he was treating me and I could come in, leave, and then die, and he'd be happy. So the fact of the matter is that people can see the same healthcare practitioner, but because of who they are and how they look, they get different care. I'm African American. The oncologist was not, and I think that may have been a factor. I don't know. He just may have been lousy to everybody, but he certainly was lousy to me. Now, here's something to think about. The outcome for expectant mothers, Black mothers in the United States, is horrible. It's about at third world levels. But when they separate the African-American mothers who see an African-American doctor versus African-American mothers who see a white doctor, the ones who see a Black doctor have a far better outcome, closer to what the national average is. And the reason is Many doctors don't want to or don't know how to or something to communicate with people who do not look just like them. And this is a serious problem. Just as it was with prostate cancer and anything else. Now, I was in the Air Force, and military doctors are great. Military doctors, by the way, are trained to treat even enemy combatants who are wounded the same way they do their own people. So there's a whole different attitude. Plus, when you're in the military, you know your doctor's on duty, off duty, and there's a greater ability to communicate and connect. I've always had experience with military doctors. When I retired from the Air Force, I tried to find doctors that fit at least one of these three categories. They were a minority, they were a woman, or they were former military, because I could communicate with them. And that's fine for GPs, but when you need a specialist, and again, there are fewer minorities in the specialist fields like oncology, then you deal with the cards that are dealt to you. The second oncologist was a far better doctor, was a far better facility, but it was clear he had a difficult time in answering my questions and talking to me. So let me tell you what happened with this guy. It's kind of funny. I told him I'm going to leave the country and move to the Philippines, and I wanted to get advice, what to look for a doctor, what alternate medications to take, all those sorts of things. I couldn't find the ones I was there. He would never answer the question. And I said, look, doctor, I need some help. I'm moving to the Philippines. What do you suggest? And he said this. He said, well, you might consider castration.
Oh man,
And
that's terrible. That's not appropriate as a joke as a doctor in that position.
It wasn't a joke.
I said, it wasn't a joke.
I looked at him. I said, really? He said, yes. And I said, well, that would take a lot of discussion. And he said, sure would. And then he walked out.
Wow, that is crazy.
It took me 6 months before I could get him to sit down and talk to me like a human being as to why he would suggest that. What are some alternate things I could do if the cancer reemerged, and all those key things. But what I had to do? Wait a second. I'm angry. I just want to vent. Let me tell you what I did in order to get his attention. I created a PowerPoint because I researched him. He is really one of the top doctors in the field. He went to the University of Oklahoma undergraduate in med school. Then he went to Vanderbilt for his internship, and then he did a postdoc at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Now, Vanderbilt and MSK, as well as Stevenson's Cancer Center here in Oklahoma City, are NCI's National Cancer Institutes. So he had top training all the way, and he's also published over 30 articles on cancer. So I said, you seem to know a lot. So let's talk about this. Why did you suggest castration? And he was embarrassed to the point where he had to have an intelligent conversation with me. This is a national epidemic.
So then what did he say when he finally had it?
Well, then he said, well, the reason I said that is because, I treat a lot of, he works at the Veterans Hospital too. And so if you who go to the Philippines and they can't get to healthcare, et cetera, I'm thinking, well, my insurance will cover me in the Philippines, one. Two, I'm not going to live in a village in the province. I'm going to be in the main capital in Manila, where there's all kinds of healthcare options there. And I said, he just assumed that because he refused to have a conversation with me to understand the patient.
Yeah, definitely. And so when he finally was willing to have a conversation with you, then what did he say?
Well, he then said, well, again, the reason for the castration comment was because that is an easy fix, if you will, for someone going over to a remote area. I then explained that I wasn't. And he said, well, there are some options. And he actually listed some optional medications if and when there was a resurgence of the prostate cancer and it became untreatable by my current medication. Then he gave straightforward answers that he could have given me 6, maybe 9 months prior to that. It's just, why do I have to go through that just because I don't have blonde hair, blue eyes, and white skin? And this is very common.
Yeah,
Sadly,
and
very common.
it could be a matter of it could be that, or it could also be a perception of um not race, but economic status. They could be judging you based on economic status, and they could judge anyone and treat
Yeah,
everyone that
absolutely.
way because, yeah, but of course, race is one of the things where, people look at first and like, oh, you're this, you're probably this, right? But I mean,
Exactly.
I've heard a
Well,
lot
let
of
me,
mistreatment of, other nationalities as well. The common
yes,
thread to me seems to be they don't think you can afford what they have to offer.
think you can afford. Now, here's the other thing. This was with my sons. I went to a pediatrician, and this was a new pediatrician to the practice. I found out she was from South Africa, which may have been the reason why she thought I was as dumb as a stump. My middle son was born with a basketball in his hand. I mean, he played basketball since he was 3. And we were talking about, I don't know, something that I think he had a stress fracture or something like that. And she said, does he play basketball? I said, yes, 8 days a week. And she looked at me, and all of a sudden, there's 7 days in a week. She didn't pick up that I was giving the hyperbole and then riffing off of the Beatles song about 8 days.
Mm.
She thought I was so damn ignorant. I didn't know 7 days were in a week.
No humor.
Now, no humor. I'm thinking, why would you think I'm that stupid? I just kind of looked at her. I wouldn't think that of a 7-year-old. But, she sees this black guy. He probably never went to school and washed his hands before. I have no idea. But this is I would love, as you know, I am a public speaker. I do seminars and training. I would love to go to medical schools and tell the doctors, do not judge the patient before you know him or her. And secondly, do not treat them differently as you think you do.
You don't have to go to medical school to do that, Dave. You're going to do a fine job. You are doing it right now. You're doing a fine job telling people how it is. And, yeah, medical school won't get rid of people's biases, and they won't necessarily listen to you just because you necessarily have a degree. That
That's
won't mean that
true.
people will listen to you.
There is a horrible story during COVID, how an African American woman doctor who had COVID was trying to explain to her healthcare team the type of care she needed. They didn't listen to her, and she died.
Yeah, I have a friend. She's Black, but she's from
Mm-hmm.
the Dominican Republic. So
Mm-hmm.
she speaks, she kind of surprises people when she speaks because even though she's Black, she speaks Spanish. So she acts like
Yeah.
a Hispanic, just her mannerisms and her voice. So kind of throws people off. but
Yeah.
she commands respect because, she's a doctor and she's able to like, hey, you can't, they will try to pull things over her and her husband, who's also Black. But she's like, hey, listen, you don't know it, but I'm a doctor. I may not look like a doctor, but she'll just start answering them. They'll get all
Yeah.
surprised. They're like, oh, you mean we have to treat you like we should because you know better,
Well, I mean,
which is
that's the
really
absurdity.
sad.
That's the absurdity of it all. I am actually the 3rd generation of my family with a graduate degree, not just college, but a graduate degree. My wife went to medical school. My daughter-in-law is an oncologist. And I shouldn't have to pull out my resume, my family ties in order to be treated with respect and dignity. No one should have to do that. It's an indictment on the profession that this is so common. When these people take an oath to heal, but they only mean it for people they like, or only mean it for people with whom they have something in common. It's an absurdity. It is an obscenity. It is really a crime. Not necessarily statutorily, but it's a crime against humans, not humanity, against humans that they have judged less valuable.
Yeah, and I would like to say that it's not limited to medical professionals. I wouldn't say that it's only medical doctors that are, that are guilty of, mistreating people based on, race or socioeconomic status. But of course, when it comes to doctors, you expect them to care for people, right? You expect them to not be biased and racist and, have bedside manners and stuff like that. Like, you think that it's a given. But the truth is that I feel like there's a lot of bad people in all professions. But, with certain professions, like, for example, with the legal profession, we've come to expect it. We're like, oh yeah, lawyers, they're just like that. And so when we find a good lawyer, we're like, oh, he's actually a good lawyer, you know? And politicians, of course, they're infamous for being, just only, primarily concerned about their own gain, not really about the people, even though that's what they're supposed to, that's what their job is supposed to be about, caring about the people, just like medical doctors, really just like lawyers. Lawyers are supposed to be defending the innocent, right? And,
Yeah.
establishing justice and stuff like that. We should expect these things of everyone. And unfortunately, our professionals, the professionals in our world, they're not taught basic things. And I think part of the problem, Dave, is that we, in our educational system, we teach a lot about law, we teach a lot about science, we teach a lot about, how to get things done, even history, but we don't have of an emphasis on ethics, on morality, on common decency, on how to treat people. I remember I'm from the Philippines, so I'm very interested to know that you're thinking about moving there. But I remember I had a discussion with my parents when I got older, and we were talking about how the public school system really failed me. I felt like it really failed me as a person and as an immigrant. As an immigrant, came here when I was 3 years old, and I was having a discussion about it with my parents, and they said, you know what? In the Philippines, it was different. In the Philippines, they didn't just teach you education. They taught you manners. They taught you how to respect people. They taught you how to be a good person. And they said, we thought that the public school system in America would be the same. We thought that the American school system would be better than what we had in the Philippines. And we just realized together that it was wrong. We focus a lot on scholastic, achievement, but not so much on, just being a good person, which is I feel character development. That's more important than going to calculus. Who cares if you know calculus if you're a horrible human being who lies and cheats and is are can't judge a person by who they are, instead of the color of their skin or how much money they have. Like you've lost the most important lessons in life if you don't focus on these things.
Yes. Well, I think that is it, but it is also very critical when you have those professions that deal in life and death situations. Whether they're police officers, firemen, doctors, nurses, military, you really need people who have a high sense of ethics and a high sense of concern for others, because they can do so much wrong, so much damage.
Yes, for sure.
It's really very important. I went to the Air Force Academy that had a huge emphasis on ethics and honor and becoming a trustworthy and valuable person. To treat people with dignity and respect, no matter what rank they were or where they came from. It just that's how you're supposed to be. Now, having said all of that about the Air Force Academy, I do know people who graduated who didn't quite live up to those ideals, even though they were trained. But I think it's also, again, what do you value? What do you respect? What do you understand? And what is it? Do you understand what you don't understand? And also, do you overcome the influence of the general culture? I'll tell you a story about my own grandson, who I love dearly. But when he was smaller, probably about 6, 7 years old, I was taking him to an after school program. And on the way there, we were passing a convenience store, and he wanted to get some chips. We got the chips, we're leaving, and we're sitting in the car eating the chips and saw these 3 workers. They were clearly Hispanic workers. And my grandson, now mind you, is 6 years old. He said, "Oh, Gramp, I think they're going to go in and rob the store." I said, "Fox, why did you say that?" "What? Because why? They looked like that." I don't know where he got that bit of bigotry. I know he didn't get it at home. Or if he got it at home, it was from the television, but it's in the culture. My own grandson did that. So I said, we're going to sit here and we're going to eat these chips and we're going to wait till they come out. And the men went in, got whatever it was after work they wanted to get at the convenience store, and they left. I said, see, they went in, they did what they wanted to do, and they left just like everybody else. It is not nice. I couldn't go into detail. I said, it's not nice to look at somebody and think you know something about them, and it's what you know about them is bad just because they look a certain way. Don't you ever do that again. Now,
Yeah.
it's too often people tolerate that behavior or mimic it for their children. And again, when we're talking about health, information is valuable to everybody. I had the worst diagnosis of my life, and my conversation with my healthcare professionals were less valuable than my elementary school nurse when I skinned my knee.
And you know
What
what's
an embarrassment.
interesting, and you know what's interesting about that fact too, is that your school nurse probably got paid a lot less money
Yes.
than those professionals there mistreating you. I think that's quite fascinating when things, facts like that are true.
That's exactly right. Well, as my mother always said, you think you know who's important in the world. Baseball players get paid millions of dollars. They go on strike, and your life goes on. Yes, you missed the ball game, you missed the fun rooting for your team, but you just go on as life is. But if the garbage collectors go on strike, your life and everybody else's life is miserable. So what's the problem with the pay? Who's more important? Because we worship money and because we give great deference to people who have titles, whether it's doctor or whatever, people are not always worthy of the respect that we give them because of the lack of respect they give us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have a friend also. He was saying that when he was specifically talking about chefs, actually, he was saying that historically, when there were societies and they started elevating like basically non-essential people. I'm not that's a bad term. Not everyone is essential, but when they start elevating non-essential professions,
Mhm.
and making them like the stars, like the example you just said, when you have these
Yeah.
athletes, I don't want to say bad things about athletes. I mean, sports are great. They keep you healthy, whatever. But
Yes.
I'm just saying the disproportionate amount of money that they're paid. I have issues with that. But he was saying that historically, when we basically elevate these professions, like athletes, and also even like professional cooks, professional cooks, they they they're like celebrities sometimes these days. And
Yes.
he was saying that historically, when societies start doing things like this, it means that they've entered into this age where decadence is more important than things that should be important to a society. Like how you,
Yes.
I believe the most important marks of a society is how you treat those who are weaker than you. And this is a Jewish value, how you treat the old and how you treat the young, the very young children, and how you treat the disabled. And I think this
Yes.
is really a true test of society is how do you treat the poor? How do you treat the needy? How do you treat the helpless? And the
Yes.
more you care about these kinds of people, the better off that society is. The more it will last. The more it will think of ways to improve life for everyone. And the less you care about these types of people, well, that shows how corrupt it has become. And when it becomes corrupt like that, it's we become filled with bad policies. Um, you know, things become unsafe, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I told a negative story about my grandson. He's actually developing into a wonderful young man. Let me tell you what he has become. He plays soccer, and he had a coach who was kind of hardcore this year. And the coach would make them run laps. And if you came in last, you'd have to run an extra lap. So everybody would run harder. And there was a kid on his team who was consistently falling behind. So my grandson said, "Well, I just stayed with him, and we ran together, and we ran the extra laps together." And he is really, that is what he has become. He's a very thoughtful and kind person. But it's amazing how that stands out. it, it, it could have been, the story might have been told that the entire team decided to stay back with the one who struggled the most so that that kid would not be singled out, but encouraged to do better as a team. Well, it's going to take a while before we do that, but we have to recognize the problem first. We have to point it out. You'll read articles about why African Americans have less success in various healthcare problems. And they say, well, it could be genetic. Well, Africans live longer than African Americans do. So it can't be genetic, must be something here. And then they say, well, you must understand the great burden of racism. Yeah, but, it's the great burden of the racist doctors that have the last say in that. If they don't listen to you, if they don't care about you enough to find out your status, to find out what your condition is, and just prescribe based on an assumption of a database of zero, that is horrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Did you ever hear the story about how, after, World War II and Nazi Germany,
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of scientists, doctors, including medical doctors, who would do really inhumane experiments
Yes.
to Jews and other people who,
Like
they would,
Dr. Mingala.
yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
what a lot of people don't know is they did not all face trial and imprisonment for the things that they did. Some of them were recruited into the American government. Now, of course, this is a conspiracy theory, but I do tend to believe it. So some of them were recruited into the American government because they actually wanted their research. They wanted the knowledge that they got from the inhumane experiments. And so they gave them, they absolved them and hired them. I mean, it's kind of common. You hear stories of, there's this hacker and he steals a bunch of important data, and then the authorities go to them and they're like, okay, well, you can either go to jail or work for the FBI. Which one will it be? So it's probably that kind of thing. It's a common thing that
Well,
humans do.
you know, these scientists. There was a great rush for scientists as the Russians were coming in from the east, and the British and Americans were coming in from the west to scarf up German scientists because they carried things to an extreme point. And sometimes they relied on slave labor, sometimes they did in human practices. But let me go back to American history. There's something called the Tuskegee experiment. Tuskegee
Yes.
Institute was or is a historically Black university. And at Tuskegee, they treated these men and told them they had bad blood, when in fact they had syphilis. They did not give them treatment for syphilis because they wanted to see how syphilis would progress if it was untreated. And they did that to Black Americans. And this was within the 20th century. So, yeah, it's not really that surprising or new that doctors, medical doctors, people we put on a pedestal, can be monsters or less than what we'd expect of them.
Yeah, that's right. They purposefully lied to them basically and told them, yeah, we're treating you.
Yep.
But they really weren't. And they could have saved people, but instead they used them as human experiments. And people think
Not,
that was a one-time, thing. That was just something that was made known. That was just something that was popularized in media. There's still that kind of stuff going on all the time. To
well,
to and they'll experiment on different races as well. If they know. That's why I hate those forms when they ask you, what is your race, and I'm filling out this form that has, like, who cares, like, what does it matter? Nothing should be different based on my race. And like, oh, we're just trying to take statistics. I'm like, I don't want to be a statistic. I
yeah,
just want.
I understand that. I also, though, understand the need for that because it would not be so obvious that Black women get better results when they see Black doctors if they didn't do that sort of work. So it is a double-edged sword. I think pointing out the discrepancies, the cruel behavior, the lack of service or the lack of positive results from similar populations, I think that can be advantageous when you point that out and make corrections. But if you don't, if you just keep on going. Now, my second oncologist, as I said, is a very good doctor. He's brilliant. But he was a horrible communicator with me. Another thing he did is he always recorded that he spent 15 minutes with me. And that happens to be a bold-faced lie. The longest time he ever spent with me was 7 minutes when I forced him to talk to me because I've done the research. I know you know things. It says you use cutting-edge results. Castration isn't a cutting-edge treatment. So let's talk about that. And when I confronted him, suddenly we had a conversation. It's horrible.
Yeah. And what's terrible is that not everyone is like you, who will take the time to research and study and not take, not take that kind of stuff, not take the crap that you took from him. A lot of people will think, oh, well, there's nothing that can be done for me. I guess I'll just
absolutely
suffer and die. I mean, It's really terrible. So you finally got answers from him only because you challenged
Mm-hmm.
him, researched him, and
Mm-hmm.
presented to his face what you knew he knew and forced him to basically expound on it. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
And then you were able to get some good answers and some good, he was able to point you into a good direction.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. And another thing is, you basically fired your first doctor. A lot of
That's true.
people a lot of people don't think that they can do that. And when it comes to children, parents aren't even allowed to do that. Oftentimes when a parent has a child and they go to their primary doctor and the doctor says one thing, if you challenge what they say and you look for a second opinion, oftentimes they will take you to CPS. You know,
Really?
yes, I've heard of parents being told, they're like, "Oh, I want to go get a second opinion." They're like, "Okay, you can do whatever you want, but if you don't do this treatment for your child, we're going to contact CPS on you." It's like a policy. It's like just something that they do. They can't do that if you're an adult, but they can do that if it has to do with your children, which I think is terrible.
Wow.
You're not saying that you're not going to treat your child. You're just saying
We want a second opinion.
you just want a second opinion. Why don't you have the right to do that?
Oh, that's horrible.
It is
Well,
terrible.
thank God that doctor from South Africa thought I was so stupid. I didn't know there were 7 days in a week. Or evidently, maybe she was so stupid she didn't understand the point of hyperbole. But whatever it is, um, she was a very good clinician for my kids. She was very good for that. So, I know she must have shook her head. Those poor kids being raised by a man stupid. He thinks there's 8 days in a week. I don't know what her problem was, but that is frightening because had she not been good, for sure we weren't going to stay there.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I think that if it's possible, it's good when people take the time to educate their doctors on bedside
Yeah.
manners. And also I've heard of
Yeah.
patients educating their doctors on holistic treatments, like
Oh yeah.
yeah,
American doctors know nothing about nutrition.
right. A lot of times they only
And
start
holistic
learning.
medicine is I'm sorry, I was going to say holistic medicine is voodoo science to them.
That's slowly changing though, because it's
Mm-hmm.
getting popular. It's getting trendy to take herbs and, stuff like that. One of my I was on a call with someone. I was on a coaching call, and she was saying that um, she had an obstruction in her fallopian tube. She got diagnosed at the
Mm.
hospital, and then they wanted to do something else to her, but she's like, "No, I'm gonna try to figure this out by myself." And she figured it out. She took some herbs and combination of things, and she went back. And she was telling them, they're like, "Oh wow, it's not there anymore." And she told them what they did, and they got their first lesson, on how to solve this problem naturally. And that's really great. That's really great. Some people, they want to just, well, like me, for example, I'm like, I give up on the medical system. I don't want to see doctors anymore. But the truth is, when people do go back to the medical system and they educate their doctors, things become better. And when people like you, when you keep going to the doctor who may have some issues and bad bedside manners, but you show them who you are through the years, through interaction and, you taking the time to research and present the information to him, then it slowly starts changing, the mindsets of these professionals. And hopefully, it will permeate throughout the field in general. But it takes that, it takes time. It takes time and it takes patience and a
Mm-hmm.
willingness to be there to help educate people.
Well, I think what you're doing in this podcast is educating people as well. And I also want to thank you very much for allowing me to vent
Yeah,
because
we need that sometimes. We need to
sometimes
share
we
these
do.
stories because if we don't share them, this is how we help solve these problems is we make people aware. of these things. So it's really
Yes.
important. Yeah. So you don't have to go to
Absolutely.
medical school to help. You are already helping. You have a great skill in public speaking. They say the pen is mightier than the sword. Well,
Yes.
spoken voice can be just as mighty or even more than the pen, especially these days with social media and YouTube and all that stuff.
Well, thank you. I do intend to use this. I tend to find an appropriate TED talk in which to bring these things up and talk about the disparity in treatment from the same practitioner.
Yeah.
This is it's totally unacceptable. It needs to stop. People need to realize that every life is as valuable as the next, and you don't know everything about them just because you saw their face or even the clothes they wear.
Yeah. And you don't know anything about them just because you've had experiences in the past with someone that
But
may have looked like them.
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it amazes me the people, and this goes, from any group to another group. The people with whom you're most familiar, you're more willing to accept diversity in opinions, attitudes, and behavior. But people who are the other, whatever the other is, groups of white Anglo-Saxon heterosexual males, or whether they're a group of Asians or whatever, you seem to think you know everything about them. I went to, I had a classmate at the Air Force Academy who was convinced that I was afraid of dogs. Now, I was afraid of dogs, and they're acting like I was afraid of dogs, and I don't understand, but he'd say, we're going someplace, sometimes you go, oh, there's dogs there, Dave. There's dogs. And evidently he played football as a black kid who was afraid of dogs. Therefore, there's no diversity in the African American race. They're all afraid of dogs.
That's terrible. Wow.
Oh gosh, it was aggravating and frustrating. And God rest his soul, he did die in an aircraft accident. But I think he went to his grave believing that I was afraid of dogs.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a story too. I went to a certain middle school, and it was predominantly Mexican. And so my best friends were Mexican. Actually, one of my best friends was Mexican, and the other one was black. And my parents liked them. They did not like them, but they wanted me to go to this other school because it had more Asians, right? And so they're like, and more
Yeah.
Filipinos in specific. They're like, they didn't hate the other school, but they're like, oh, but we want you to be with these, with our kind more. And so I did, but what's interesting is that the Mexican and the black people that I was hanging out with at my first school, they were actually a better influence on me than the Asians that I started hanging out with in my second school. And it was when I started hanging out with those Asians that my parents trusted so much that I started, learning about drugs and gangs and, all this bad
Oh
stuff
goodness.
that they thought I would be more protected from those things going to this Asian school. So that was a really interesting experience looking back.
Yeah. Yeah. And my younger sister spent her senior year in high school with me, and I taught. We're Catholic. I taught CCD, or Catholic education, to high school students. And I said, well, that's great. I know some high school students. They're all in my CCD class. You can meet them and hang out with them. They'll be at your high school. Now, I didn't learn until 2 years later what hoodlums those kids were. So I thought, well, they're good little Catholic kids. Not so much. Yeah, it's whenever you paint with a broad brush, you're doing an injustice to the diversity of individuals, and whichever way you do it. But it is deadly. It can be deadly if you're a healthcare professional and you refuse to listen to somebody because those people don't know what they're talking about, or because those people are that way. So why should I waste my time with them? I think you really would do a service to find a new job or find a new attitude, but you've got to do one or the other.
Yeah, for sure. I think also one of the problems that contributes to that is the medical insurance system that we have. There's been
Mm-hmm.
cultures in history, societies in history where you basically pay your doctor, your physician, or your healer. They didn't necessarily have those titles, physician and medical doctor. You paid the herbalist or whatever, the healer, your local healer, when you were healthy. And if you got sick, it's the healer's, so quote unquote healer's fault. It's the medicine man's fault because they didn't keep you healthy. But now,
Mm-hmm.
now we don't have that. Now the medical professionals, they get paid more when we're sick. And so
Yes.
there's not a monetary incentive for them to heal us. There's a monetary incentive for them to keep us just sick enough so that we are alive and need their medicines to alleviate symptoms. That's where
Wow.
the monetary incentive is. And that's a real problem. And I think it's partly because of medical insurance. I'm not trying to say we need to get rid of medical insurance, but there's something broken there, for sure.
Yeah. Well, we have, for instance, I think there are more safety nets in the United States for those people who on different levels of income here in the United States, especially since the implementation of Obamacare. More people can afford insurance now, and that's good. What's unfortunate is that it doesn't matter if you can afford it. My insurance, again, I went to one. I was a patient at one of the top cancer care institutes in the state of Oklahoma, one of the best in the country. I remember that, but still, my first doctor decided to give me the cheap medicine. I can't explain it, and I can't excuse it. That's for sure.
Was he trying
Uh,
to say, like, oh, you should thank me that you don't have to spend that much money out of pocket?
I think that's what he was trying to say. That he
Hmm.
figured I couldn't afford anything because I'm black. You know, I, Lord, yeah, it just is so.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it was nice, but he should present you with the options. Like, he should say,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. He didn't. And as I tried to talk to him, said, my insurance. No, 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 no. I don't want to. This is what you're getting. And I went to him honestly 2 times more often than I should have. That's on me. That's on me. I should have just at that point gone to another facility, and I'm glad I did because really, I honestly believe I would not be here alive today if I stayed with that bozo. Now, there is a postscript to that first doctor. The hospital was bold enough to ask me to review the hospital on Google,
Mm.
and I did. And I talked about the doctor. I got a call from the hospital administrator's office. Well, what can we do to make this right? I said, I don't think there's anything you can do to make this right. Let me tell you more about this person. A few months later, I got a letter that he was no longer there, which is good. He doesn't need to be practicing medicine if he treats people like that, in my opinion. But especially not when you get the worst diagnosis of your life. That's when you need a doctor who really gives a damn and really listens to you.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, I've had greater conversations about injuries with my elementary school nurse than I have had with either of my oncologists. And the second one, I had to force words out of it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And that's it, it's really true that it's so hard to find a good doctor. And that's part of, why it's my mission and the mission of Arukah.com, of our school, to empower people with knowledge, so that they don't have to rely as much on the modern medical system, or at least so that they have enough confidence to challenge it and question it and compare it with their own research. It's so imperative. And you did that. You did do that. So that's great that you did that. And people just need to do that more. Just like realize that we are our own best doctors, and any healer, and whether it's a medical doctor, a nurse, an herbalist, a nutritionist, they can help you maybe provide a piece of the puzzle, but really it's up to you, it's up to everyone to put the pieces together ourselves. We can't rely on someone else to save us. We have to rely on we are one of the reasons we're our own best doctors is because no one else will put our health and healing first before profit and protocol. And most, in hospitals and, doctor offices, there's protocol that needs to be followed, or there's
Yeah.
profit. What's the most profitable route? We're the only ones that don't care about that. We're just like, how do I get healthy? How do I heal myself? And we really don't know that if we can trust other people to do that. And sometimes people might be doing, maybe they were a good doctor at one point in time, but sometimes also people get burnt out,
Yes.
and maybe they should retire or take a long vacation, but instead they just keep going, maybe because they need the money or whatever, and they start practicing bad medicine, which, if in another
Yeah.
profession, you might just burn someone's food or something, but when it comes to, the medical profession, you're not just dealing with your own life, you're dealing with someone else's, which can be really, really bad, which is why it's so important for everyone, I believe, to empower themselves with health and healing knowledge.
Absolutely. Well, I really have to go, but I want to tell you how much I've enjoyed talking with you. And thank you so much for listening to me. And thank you for what you're doing.
Yes,
Very,
absolutely. It was an honor to have my speech coach here, and I wasn't sure what you wanted, what you wanted to talk about, but this is right on. This is great. Anytime you want to vent about the medical system, I'm ready. I'm here for you.
well, thank you. Thank you. well, thanks so much.
Okay, but I just wanted to close with a positive note. We're not trying to hate on the whole modern medical system. We do want to see improvements.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Because I have a whole lot of wonderful healthcare professionals besides the last two with my most critical illness. The other people have been fantastic.
That's good.
So,
That's good.
including my elementary school nurse. So,
Yeah, for sure. All righty. Well, have a wonderful night, and I look forward to seeing you soon. I don't know if we have another call coming up soon with VOP, but we'll
we
definitely.
should.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
Well, thank you very much. And I'll
okay.
talk to you again.
All right. Have a great night.
All right.
Bye bye.
Thanks. You too. Bye.